Hello and welcome to my 10th lesson on filmmaking terms and analysis. This lesson is all about sound. So for this lesson, you're going to want to go to your sound vocab document. I'd like to start with a question. What is an example where sound in film has a powerful impact on the audience? Perhaps you're immediately thinking of scary movies. In a scary movie, ominous sound can make us fearful. It can give us fearful emotions. It can intensify the emotions of the scene to make us frightened. Perhaps you're thinking of a romantic film where the swelling of the romantic music can heighten the feeling of love between two characters. Perhaps you're thinking of all the sound effects that go along with filmmaking that can make something feel more realistic and immersive, like you're really there in the environment. Perhaps you're thinking of times in films when we hear something, but we can't see it. The sound that's been added in can trigger our imagination to imagine what's about to happen. Sometimes sound, through the voice of the character, is used to introduce someone before we even see them on screen. There are many different ways that sound can have a powerful impact on the audience. Those are just a few. Again, go ahead and open up your sound vocabulary document in your film vocab folder, and let's get started recording some basic sound vocab. Before we get started with our sound vocab, I want to show you a clip that oftentimes immediately grabs students' attentions and makes them interested in the job of sound design. And that is this video of Foley artists. We're about to learn what Foley means, but let's go ahead and watch what a Foley artist actually does by looking at some Foley artists working on the sound for an 80s action film. Go ahead and give these guys your full attention. Believe it or not, this was their job, and they were getting paid money to do this. Check it out.
Here, we see two Hollywood Foley artists bringing an action sequence to life.
We're out of sync.
What do you mean, me?
Let's take it back to the head of this shot. We'll pick it up at the table smash. right this time, T.
Okay, I'll try.
Hopefully that gets you excited about the idea of designing sound for a movie, and perhaps you had no idea that most of the sound in a film is not recorded live when the actors are recorded. Most of the sound in a film is recorded after images are captured, after the footage is shot. Then it's a sound designer's job to go back in and add high quality sounds for every action on screen. That brings us to our first vocab term, sound design. Sound design is the process of recording, acquiring, manipulating, or generating audio elements. In the image on the left, you can see that a woman is holding what's called a boom pole. A boom pole is a long pole that can extend and be used to hold a microphone above actors. This is used to record live dialogue during a scene. In order to get crisp, clear dialogue on set when the footage is being recorded, you need to get a microphone as close to the actors as possible without it being in the shot. This is actually a boom pole that's on a stand, and it's been shortened so that I can talk into it while sitting, but I could extend it up to 13 feet to hold it from far away above actors, above the frame of the image, so that the audio of the actor speaking can be captured without interrupting the shot. Recording live audio is just one form of sound design. A lot of sound designers actually create the sounds that you see on screen. In the image in the middle, you can see two Foley artists working together to create the sound of scraping metal. You can imagine a variety of scenarios in film where you would need the sound of scraping metal, but it doesn't necessarily have to come from the same objects that create the sound on screen. In this image, the objects being used are a pitchfork and the metal roof of a car, but that could be used for any metal scraping sounds that are similar to that sound. In the image on the right, you can see a sound designer is using software to clean up sound. Sound designers are often bringing audio into a computer to manipulate the sound. New sounds could even be created from heavy manipulation or combination of sounds. Next up, we have the idea of diegetic sound. Diegetic sound is any sound from the story world of the film. This is sound that can be logically heard by the people in that world. Sounds like footsteps and characters talking both fall into the category of diegetic sound. Any sound that you hear as an audience that would also logically be heard by the characters in that story world is considered diegetic sound. The most basic form of diegetic sound is room tone. Room tone is the subtle, low-volume sound that is heard at any location when no one is speaking or moving. Sound designers will record room tone and then later use that room tone to fill in any gaps between audio files. Room tone is also used to place under any sound effects that were not recorded at the location to make them sound like they're a part of the location. Without room tone, you can't put your audio files together without sudden, complete, quiet parts of your film. You can listen to the room tone of my room now. And here's what it sounds like without any room tone at all. And here's what it sounds like if I cut out the room tone in between each statement. Statement number 1, statement number 2, statement number 3. So as you can see, room tone is really important to just make your sounds blend together. You need to record enough room tone to have a solid foundation on which to place multiple sound effects and sound files so that they all blend in with each other. And that room tone is recorded live on location with all of your actors present. You just say quiet on set and record room tone for at least 30 seconds so that you have some sound to work with. You want to listen to make sure that that room tone is as clean as possible. If there are any movements or extra sounds, those sounds will be repeated. It's actually better to record more than 30 seconds, but it would be 30 seconds minimum to have something to work with. We're going to watch a brief clip from Indie Mogul that does a good job of explaining room tone. Let's check it out.
Every room that you shoot a scene in has its own room tone or ambient sound, which gets picked up by your microphone when you record audio on set. I'll use an old video I did back in January 2009 as an example of an issue that affects many of the entries that get sent in to me for Mogul or Made. Listen to the background noise on this shot where the source audio was recorded and used. Then we cut to a shot where we did not record audio, then back to the shot with the source audio.
You guys are still here?
Hear that faint background noise? And hear how it just drops after Tuck sighs and looks over at us? It doesn't seem so obvious till it's gone, and it's a mistake that can come off poorly if left in, like it just did. Viewers need to lose themselves in the reality of a film and being able to discern where audio tracks cut in and cut out, even when it's just the sound of the room, can take someone out of what they're watching. The sound underneath a scene can be affected by just about anything. Air conditioning or heating being on, a very faint buzz from lights, especially fluorescent ones. In fact, here's what my room tone sounds like right now. Here's what it sounds like when I cut to silence. Here's a view of my editing timeline so you can see the exact moment the room tone cuts off. And again, every room will have a different tone. A great example of these differences is shown in a video from the YouTube channel The Substream, as shown here.
Hopefully you understand the importance of recording room tone if you want to have good sound in your film. It's an important element that's going to help a sound designer piece everything together and make it flow smoothly from sound to sound. But what about when your background sound is more than just room tone? What would we call that? When you have more than just room tone, like the sounds of animals or cars or crowds of people, that extra background sound is called ambient sound. Ambient sound is a collection of sounds. It's all the sounds present at a location to create that environment around the characters. Common ambient sounds include wind, water, birds, crowds, office noises, traffic, etc. Here you can see an app that allows you to manipulate ambient sound, and you can see the different options available to someone when they're manipulating the sounds of an outdoor environment. Let's take a moment to listen to the ambient sound of a spaceship that a sound designer created. Doesn't it feel like you're in a spaceship? All of those little beeps and boops could have been generated in a computer to create the feeling of an ambient environment, to place the listener in the spaceship. Ambient sound is going to enable the audience's imagination to feel like they're really in a spaceship. Let's take a moment to listen to some ambient sound from a forest environment. Multiple sounds can be layered together to create an ambient soundscape that really makes you feel like you're in a forest. Everything from wind through the leaves of trees to the sounds of birds in the air and little critters moving around on the ground. Let's take a moment to listen to some ambient sound from a medieval tavern. Again, the layers of multiple sounds, like the sounds of clinking plates, the sounds of a fire, the sounds of footsteps on wooden floors, and the sounds of indistinct people mumbling, talking to each other, all of those layers create this environmental sound that we call ambient sound. Let's take a moment to listen to the ambient sound of a shopping mall environment. Again, ambient sound is giving us a sense of space. It's immersing us in the environment, giving us a feel for everything that is around the characters, even though we might not see those things. Ambient sound can even help to convince the audience that the characters are somewhere where the actors really are not. So if you don't have permission to record in a mall, but you have a hallway that looks like the mall hallway, you can record your characters in that environment and add the ambient sound of a real mall to give the feeling that your characters are really in a shopping mall, even if you don't have permission to record in one. After ambient sound, we have even more diegetic sound. Remember, diegetic sound is sound that the characters could logically hear in the world. Everything from room tone to ambient sound, and now our next term, Foley. Foley is all of the manually produced sound effects. That's why I referred to the guys doing the action scene sound design as Foley artists. All of the sounds they were creating were being manually produced. They were creating them with their physical bodies, with physical objects, creating sounds with things. In the top left example, you can see that pouring buckets of water, when combining many different sounds of pouring buckets and intensifying the sound in the editing software, can replace the sound of a waterfall. In the top right example, you can see that a man falling from a high place and hitting the ground can be replaced with the sound of a backpack being slammed into the ground, giving us another example of how Foley sounds do not have to match the image we see on screen. It's just the sound that has to be convincing. That impact sound has to be convincing. And often Foley artists will combine multiple impacts to create a larger impact sound. On the bottom left example, we have an even more extreme example of how the object being used to create the sound does not have to match what we see on screen. A box of rice is being crunched to create the sound of walking in snow. Keep in mind, a lot of movies are made in Hollywood, but there's not a lot of snow there. So to create that sound of snow, Foley artists who aren't in a snowy environment in real life have to get creative. And one creative solution to creating the sound of stepping in snow, crunching through snow, is using a box full of rice. In the bottom right example, we have a more direct example of recording Foley, where the Foley artist has tried to match their shoes to the actor's shoes and the surface of the ground around them to the surface of the ground around the characters in the film to create the most authentic footstep sounds possible. One of the most common Foley sounds recorded in every Hollywood movie is the sound of footsteps. If your characters are moving across the screen, but we do not hear their footsteps, something will feel wrong. Oftentimes, the footstep sounds from the day of recording will not sound good because the voice is what the sound recorder is focusing on. You want to add in crisp, authentic sounding footsteps to really sell the authenticity of the moment, to make it sound like the characters are really there in the environment. Believe it or not, footsteps are a huge part of sound design, and you could say that they're the Foley artist's number one job. No matter if you're making a science fiction movie, an action film, a romance, or a comedy, you're going to need the sound of footsteps, unless your characters are sitting down the entire movie. So everything we've covered so far falls under the umbrella of diegetic sound. It's all sound that the characters could logically hear in the world of the film story. Next, we're going to move on to non-diegetic sound. This is the opposite. This is sound not heard by the characters, only heard by the audience. Non-diegetic sound is sound outside of the film story. This is sound that would not logically be heard by characters in the world of the film. Voiceover and mood music are the most common examples of non-diegetic sound. When a character is speaking over a scene to narrate the scene, they are not heard by the characters in the film. They are non-diegetic sound. When music is added to a scene to impact the audience's emotions, that music is not meant for the characters. They can't hear a song being played. That music is added for the audience. That's non-diegetic sound, sound only meant for the audience. Let's define voiceover. Voiceover is a piece of narration not accompanied by an image of the speaker. In this example, Morgan Freeman is doing voiceover for March of the Penguins. This documentary about penguins has a voiceover added to explain what's going on. The voiceover is added to communicate story and knowledge to the audience. It's non-diegetic. The penguins can't logically hear Morgan Freeman. His voice is only for the audience. As I mentioned before, mood music is also non-diegetic sound. Whenever you hear scary music that obviously the characters aren't hearing, that is non-diegetic sound. That music is just for you. I did not put mood music as a vocab term because it should be something we're all familiar with. But it is important to remember the term non-diegetic. So just remember, non-diegetic sound is sound only meant for the audience. Diegetic sound, most sound, is the sound meant for everyone, the characters and the audience. Sound that could logically be heard by the characters is diegetic sound. Sound that could not logically be heard by the characters, only by the audience, is non-diegetic sound. And now that we've reiterated that point, let's move on to editing sound. Our next vocab term is dubbing. When an editor is dubbing sounds, they're adding or mixing in additional sounds with the original sound recording. On the days of production, the sound designers are primarily focused on recording the voices of the actors. Afterwards, in editing, in post-production, the sound designers and editors are focused on dubbing in the extra sounds necessary to make the scene feel real. As you can see here, in a scene with a confrontation and a fight, there are a lot of sounds dubbed in. Every little green box represents a sound that was added to the original production sound. And as you can see, there's a lot of Foley sound that was dubbed in to this timeline. Another aspect of sound design that deals with sound editing is ADR, Automated Dialogue Replacement. To put it simply, ADR is when you re-record the voices of your actors. You re-record dialogue and vocal sounds like gasps, yelling, sighs, and heavy breathing. All of the dialogue and vocal sounds can be re-recorded and matched with the original footage. These re-recordings are done with the original actor after the filming process. These re-recordings are typically done to improve the quality of the audio. So most actors will experience ADR early in their acting career because it's very common that a location's sound is not good quality. There could be airplanes flying overhead, or there could be the noises of machines interfering with the sound quality on set. So actors are very familiar with recording ADR. Believe it or not, most shows that you've seen have dialogue that's been recorded after the filming process, re-recording those lines of dialogue and matching them up with the actor's lips. The way this is done is by looping the video and allowing the actor to read off of a teleprompter or a script while watching themselves perform. This way, the actor is able to match their words with their lips on screen. If they do it enough times and with some tweaks in editing, you can make it impossible to notice for the audience. Their lips will perfectly match what they're saying, and the sound quality will be super high quality that you get in a sound recording studio. In the bottom left example, you can see Hugh Jackman making all of the vocal sounds of Wolverine. He's yelling and grunting and making heavy breathing sounds while he swings his arms, giving himself the energy of the live moment when he was acting, and he's making all of those sounds again. In the bottom middle example, you can see an actor re-recording his dialogue while watching the screens of the computer so that he can match up what he's saying with what he's seeing. You can see two more ADR examples on the right. The top right is professional actor in a sound studio, and the bottom right is a father and son working in a home studio to re-record dialogue, ADR style. Next up for editing sound, we have the concept of a sound bridge. A sound bridge is created when sound carries over a visual transition. Sound will carry over a cut. It will continue to play from before the cut and after the cut, creating a bridge. This kind of editing can help transition out of a scene, such as when a sound effect, dialogue, or music is heard before the new scene begins. In this example from The Matrix, Trinity is talking to Neo in a nightclub where electronic music is playing. The sound designer slowly raises the sound of an alarm, blending it with the sound of the electronic music until it's loud enough for us to notice that it's actually the sound of an alarm going off, and then the editor cuts to an actual alarm next to Neo's bed. And in that moment, we realize we've transitioned to a new scene, but the sound of the alarm has created a sound bridge that carried us from scene A into scene B. Let's take a look and a listen to this sound bridge example from The Matrix.
I was looking for an answer. It's the question that drives us, Neo. It's the question that brought you here. You know the question, just as I did.
What is the Matrix?
The answer is out there, Neo. It's looking for you. And it will find you if you want it to.
So again, a sound bridge like this alarm in The Matrix is a sound that carries over from scene A into scene B. It's usually a sound coming from something in scene B that we hear before we get to scene B. Sound bridges are usually noticeable to the audience. They're very interesting transitions from one scene to another. But within a scene, little sound transitions are happening all the time. For example, we have two basic types of sound transitions happening almost every shot in Hollywood productions. First, we have the L cut. In an L cut, the audio from the preceding shot overlaps with the image of the following shot. You can see in the editing software on the bottom here that the first shot's audio is stretched across where the second shot is placed. So we hear the audio from the first shot in the first shot and the second shot. Next up, we have the J cut. The J cut is happening all the time in Hollywood scenes. In this type of audio transition, the sound from the following shot is overlapped with the image of the preceding shot. So we hear the sound of shot B before we see shot B. The sound bridge example from The Matrix is also an example of a J cut. But like I said, little L cuts and little J cuts are happening all the time, and you wouldn't call those sound bridges. Sound bridges are usually noticeable transitions from scene to scene, but within those scenes there are many different shots. Especially in dialogue scenes, you want to use L cuts and J cuts to smooth out the cuts between characters as they speak to each other. You could use an L cut to have a character speaking and then cutting to a person listening while the person is still speaking. That sound from person A and shot A will continue into shot B, where we see the person listening. That is an L cut. You could also use a J cut in a dialogue scene, where we see a person speaking, they stop speaking, and we hear the response for a moment and then cut to the person responding. So that part where they start the response, while we still look at person A, that's part of a J cut, where we hear a character before we look at them. Let's take a look at some examples of L cuts and J cuts in Hollywood films.
Shut it! So! Did you hear that? Let's listen again.
Shut it! So!
Did you notice how the sound from the next scene arrived before the image did? That's called a J-cut. A J-cut is an editing technique where the audio of a shot or a scene precedes the visual. Now, pay close attention to the audio in this clip from the Tree of Life.
Count it out.
3, 4, 5, 6, 7.
Did you notice how the sound of the boy counting carried over to the next sequence of shots? That's called an L-cut, which means that the audio from one shot carries over to the next shot. These two techniques got their name from how they appear in an editing sequence. A J-cut makes a J shape, while an L-cut makes an L shape. Almost every film includes at least some degree of a J or L cut. You may have never noticed this before, but simple conversations use them all the time.
I ain't got no worries, man. Not them kind what I had before.
He will, I asked him.
Well, thank you. It was very nice of you, but I'm out. I'm done.
J and L cuts allow an editor to break up a conversation and create better, more natural flow with reaction shots.
So again, editing sound is going to involve a lot of dubbing, a lot of adding and mixing in sounds with the original production audio track. It will often involve ADR, re-recording dialogue with the actors from the film while they watch the scenes that they were in. This enables the sound designers to get the highest quality dialogue sound possible. This process is often required when scenes are recorded in noisy environments. So if you don't want to do ADR, you need to remind your director to pay attention to the amount of noise in an environment. Then we have sound bridges. Editors can use sound bridges to transition from one scene to another. But L cuts and J cuts should be used frequently, especially in dialogue scenes, so we're not constantly cutting to the person who's speaking, but transitioning smoothly between reaction shots and shots of people speaking. We also talked about diegetic and non-diegetic sound. Remember, diegetic sound is all of the sound that characters in the world could logically hear. This includes room tone, ambient sound, and Foley, and of course, the dialogue of the characters. Then we have non-diegetic sound. That's all of the sound that's added only for the audience. It mainly consists of voiceover narration and mood music added to impact the audience, but not meant for the characters in the world of the film. For this lesson's activity, I'm challenging you to record some diegetic sound. For your diegetic sound practice, I want you to record 10 seconds of room tone. I want you to be completely quiet, stand perfectly still, and record 10 seconds of a quiet room. If you're in a noisy house, try to get everyone to stand still for about 10 seconds and you'll be okay. It should sound something like this. Next up, I want you to record 10 seconds of an ambient outdoor environment. I want you to go outside and get a noisy street or a noisy forest environment. Go to the park or just step outside and record the environment outside. Hopefully you'll get different layers of sounds all recorded at once. Maybe the sounds of birds chirping, cars driving by, people chattering in the distance. All of this sound together will create that outdoor ambient environment. Record 10 seconds. Again, stand perfectly still and don't be talking. I don't want to hear you, the sound designer. I want to hear the environment. So try not to tap your feet or shuffle around. Try to stand perfectly still and just listen for 10 seconds. Finally, I want you to record 10 seconds of footstep Foley. The rule of thumb is to keep the microphone about 3 feet away from what you're recording. So aim the microphone of your phone towards your feet and walk. Walk over some interesting terrain. Maybe it's walking over gravel or walking on a sidewalk, or walking on something that makes a decent amount of sound. The problem with walking in your socks on the carpet is it's not going to make a lot of sound. Bare feet on a solid surface will make some sound, but try to make footstep sounds and try to make them sound natural, not like you're stomping super hard, but clear enough so that we can hear them. One suggested app for recording sounds is the iPhone Voice Memo app. I myself don't own an iPhone, so I would just use the voice recording app on my phone. You can also download many different free audio recording apps if you prefer to find an app that records higher quality sound. There are multiple acceptable audio file types. For example, you might record an M4A or an MP3. Whatever you record, just make sure it plays when you upload it to the internet. Again, assuming you're recording with a phone, pay attention to where the microphone is on your phone device. When you're speaking into a phone, the microphone is where your mouth goes. So look at the bottom of your phone and look for a spot that looks like it has a grill or a grate over top of it. That's to prevent dust from going into your microphone and also to limit the amount of wind that is hitting the microphone. But there's still going to be some wind. So here are some tips. Again, when recording the Foley footsteps, you want to be about 3 feet away from your feet that are hitting the ground. So when you're walking, you're holding your arm down, pointing the microphone towards your feet, but you don't have to hunch over a lot. Just hold your arm down all the way and walk how you would normally walk. That should help you record some good footstep Foley sound. When recording the outdoor ambient sound, one problem will be the wind. So stand perfectly still, but you might want to use some cloth to cover up the microphone. For example, here I've got a t-shirt and my phone. If I take my phone and put it under a piece of my t-shirt and then hold that piece of my t-shirt firmly over the microphone, not rubbing the fabric over the microphone, but holding it firmly there, I'm able to record sound outside without wind directly hitting the microphone. This prevents the harsh wind sounds. Wind can be recorded without it directly hitting the microphone, so you want to prevent the sound of wind hitting the microphone because it's not going to sound like wind that you would want in your movie. For the room tone sound, you want everything to be completely quiet inside of your house or the indoor location where you're recording. We're going to end up hearing things like your air conditioning, your computer, your refrigerator, and that's fine. Those things are part of the room tone, but you don't want people yelling or talking or little kids making noise in the background. So try to get everyone in the house to be quiet for 10 seconds to get that room tone sound. Or if you can't get everyone to be quiet, try to go in a quiet space, like in a closet where there's lots of fabric to help muffle the sound around you. Closets are kind of like miniature sound recording studios. So that's it for the 3 different sounds I want you to record. This is probably one of the easiest challenges so far, but I want you to just get started recording sound files. No video uploads, please. Just 3 audio files, but please label the sound files. I've had students upload files into the wrong folders many times, so please label Footstep Foley on the sound file that's Footstep Foley. Please label Ambient Outdoor Sound for the sound file that's Ambient Outdoor Sound. And please label Room Tone for the sound file that is your example of room tone. That's it for Lesson 10, our introduction to sound design vocabulary. Next up in Lesson 11, we'll go a little bit deeper into the vocabulary terms related to sound design. I'll see you then.